Three, two, one.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Daily Objective. We're waiting for Nikos, who is uncharacteristically late. You know, normally he's the first to show up and, well, also the first to leave because he's got this kind of red-pilled, pickup artist mentality where, like, or tactic, I should say, where it's like false time constraints. Anyway, I shouldn't roast him when he's not here to defend himself. But he is late for some reason. Maybe he didn't get the memo. Maybe he didn't get the link. Nikos, if you're watching this, wherever you are, check your email. Dylan sent out a link to the call. But anyway, good to be here with you. We're going to be talking about from Saigon to Kabul, failure in American foreign policy and the mess that happens when America leaves. Look who has joined us, everybody. If you can see him yet, it's the guy who, you know, I got to tell you, I was looking forward to the pre-show linking up, Nikos, because I knew exactly what you were going to say. What were you going to say as soon as I joined the call before the show, Nikos?
Which would be what?
I was asking you. You know what you were going to say.
Oh, that no, today it wouldn't apply. Today I'm really well prepared.
Okay, I know. You know what I thought you were going to say. I don't. You will need to do most of the talking. You were gonna. That's your accent, by the way. But then it's like then we go 45 minutes. Neither one of us taking a breath from everything we have to say. But you always think we're not going to know what to talk about. But in this case, it sounds like you're very prepared. In fact, you're so busy preparing, you're late for the show. Right off the bat, Robert with $2 says, "Is it too soon to impeach President Biden?" Good question. You know, maybe we'll get to what's wrong with Biden, how much of this is Biden's fault. Maybe Nikos has an opinion on that. But anyway, let's talk about the topic at hand. And please send us your super chats. And most of all, think of becoming an Ayn Rand Central UK member to help this thing grow and to get exclusive content. So Nikos Sotirakopoulos, the co-host, what do you think? Are the parallels palpable? Are they ominous?
So I spent some time today trying to figure out what exactly happened in Saigon in 75, because everyone says this is the new Saigon. So the too long did not read version is that I think this is way worse than Saigon, and I'll explain why. So it's very interesting to go back to the lessons of Vietnam, and actually, lucky enough for us, in the Ayn Rand letter, Ayn Rand actually wrote an essay, which is in two parts, which is called The Lessons from Vietnam. And the interesting thing is that the first part, it's written as he is literally watching the scenes from Saigon. So it's the equivalent of what we experienced 2 days ago. It's Ayn Rand almost in real time writing down her thoughts. And she's saying that this reminded her the situation in Russia when the Red Army was proceeding. But before we go to Rand's thing, so the first thing to notice is that the evacuation of Saigon had a different character because the United States had left the country 2 years ago. So from, let's say, around 1960, 1962, United States get very much into the Vietnam War. They send more and more and more people, and at some point they find themselves with hundreds of thousands of troops there. So in 73, for reasons that we can discuss later, the United States realized, okay, we're not going to win that war. Mostly because we're not even sure what exactly we're doing here. So the context there was that the United States was helping the South Vietnam, which was, so when Vietnam gained independence, the North was, let's say, the communist part, the South was the non-communist part. And in the South, there was a heavy presence of communist guerrillas, the so-called Viet Congs, but also they had help from the North. So what was happening is that the Americans were helping the South trying to contain the North. So the idea, notice, was not to defeat the North. So the idea was to contain the North, so basically to maintain the South. Now, there was not much to celebrate when it comes to South Vietnam. So it wasn't a regime that was either popular. So it was probably better than the North, but that's as far as it got. So we found ourselves, the United States found themselves in a situation where they were losing troops and, of course, resources on a war that no one was 100% sure why they were fighting. So in 73, they said, okay, we leave. Now, similarity number one, the BS agreement with the other side. So the same way as Trump had this quote agreement with the Taliban, Americans had with the North. And the North says, look, once you leave, we're not going to do anything. It's going to be peace. There's going to be free elections in the South, and let's see what happens. How did they deal? How did they fare in that agreement? Well, within some months, they were attacking Saigon, and in 75, April, Saigon fell. However, the United States said it's our moral responsibility to make sure that we evacuate everyone from Saigon. So the troops had left the country for something like 2 years. So the evacuation of Saigon was that we're going to take with us anyone who could be in danger, anyone who was who helped us. That's why I said now it's in a way it's even worse. They didn't manage to get everyone out. So there were something, even thousands of people who were then killed by the North Vietnamese. But at least there was this idea that we have a moral responsibility to these people to take them out. And the reason you see in the scenes the helicopter is because the Vietnamese were attacking and they were bombing the airport and all that stuff. So the conditions were way more difficult. So the big picture, the similarity is a war that the Americans were not really sure what exactly they were doing there. And at some point they decide, okay, now we have to leave. They make a BS agreement that, oh, now that we're going to leave, it's going to be peace. Of course, the other side, which is not to be trusted, falls back to this agreement. And within 1.5 years, approximately in the case of Vietnam, in almost days in the case of in the case of Afghanistan, they actually attack and they take over the country. So the big similarity is, and this is where we're going to get, but I'm going to pause here to throw you the ball, that in both cases we have people who fight for something, which is bad, but something, towards people who don't know what exactly they're fighting for, and the people who know what they're fighting for win. So that's, let's say, in a very short and condensed way, the similarities and the small difference between Saigon and Kabul.
Yes. Also, thank you, Marilyn, for the super chat. Now, of the many things wrong with America's foreign policy, one of the consequences of our pragmatism, which is to say our short range game of whack-a-mole, is that we end up throwing our allies under the bus, or just people who trusted us, meaning people we asked for help. Like, so we go over there. Not sure we should be asking anyone overseas for help, like, here, help us fight these guys. I'm not sure that's ever a good idea. But when America does make a deal, America's word should be bond. America's reputation should be honorable. People should know America is a strong, confident, and trustworthy country. But that's not the impression people get, because America, we go to Vietnam, we go to wherever, Afghanistan, Iraq, we basically hire these guys, or we cut a deal with these guys to help us fight those guys. And then we just disappear and leave. And now the guys who helped us are getting devoured and destroyed. Or in some other way, we throw our friends under the bus, or our contractors under the bus. That's one of the many, many, many consequences of pragmatism, of short range games of whack-a-mole, you know, where the beaver or whatever it is pops up and you hit it down, and then two more pop up and you hit them. That's how America's foreign policy is. And it's very, very similar to the domestic policy, the lobby system. Every politician has a certain constituency to please, to promise them stuff. He's bribing, basically offering them free stuff, whether it's in the form of wealth redistribution, or tax incentives, or subsidies, whatever it is. Or the politician is gonna lobby to hurt that business over there in favor of this business over here. Whatever it is, it turns into the very, very short range sort of pragmatist, quote, problem solving at the cost of the big picture. And so you see it, whether you see it domestically in the lobby system or overseas in the type of foreign policy that America engages in, there's enormously detrimental consequences. And what do we have to show for it? What do any of these wars really have to show? Like, what do we have? What can we take away? Did Vietnam resist communism? No, the communists took over. Did Did Afghanistan become a non-Islamist country? No, they're right back exactly where they were before America showed up. So this is what Iraq, last I checked, also is not looking great. So, I mean, well, you know, what came of the struggle? What came of all of this? And it's amazing to me, you know, you cannot point this out enough. This is a consequence of philosophy. People think, oh, philosophy, who needs it? They say. And I answer, look, I mean, just look at reality. Look what we get. At home here, our America is a mess. Greece and other countries similarly. We are living in the Tower of Babel. We can't communicate with one another because everyone's so incoherent and tribal. You look overseas, you see that this pragmatist / altruist motivated policy has brought no good to anybody. Nobody, not over there and not over here. Nobody has benefited from any of this. So what's to show? What do we have to show for this? And this is, again, the consequence of philosophy. If America had an egoistic foreign policy, which is not to say going out there and pillaging, but rather going out there and defending American lives and property from threats, it would be done quick, and it would not only benefit America, but it would indirectly also benefit the rest of the world. People would see what's possible. They would wish to emulate this confident free country, and the world would gradually become a better place. Maybe not gradually, maybe quickly become a better place. But instead, people growing up in the world, they see the Taliban and the communists as having moral certainty, and they see free countries being flimsy, insecure, and apologetic. So who are they going to want to, who are they going to be inspired to follow?
So, and it's interesting that because there's such a big difference between, let's say, the American force and the Taliban, a lot of people are saying, how is it possible that these people who literally wear flip-flops defeated by default, let's say, the biggest army in the world? And it's what you said, that sometimes having ideas and fighting for something, even if it's something evil, gives you a big advantage. I mean, there's a scene in Fight Club, I don't know if you remember it, where Tyler Durden is on the basement, and there's this guy who comes basically to say, okay, I have to kick you out. And Tyler Durden starts doing crazy things like beating himself and being beaten. And then at some point says, look, I'm completely nuts. I'm ready to die for this. Are you ready to die for this? If not, just leave us here. And the guy freaks out and says, okay. That's the scene that came to my mind. And it's not only me who thought of that. So listen what Ayn Rand says about the victory of the Bolsheviks in the American Civil War, in the Russian Civil War. Now, the Bolsheviks, so she writes this related to Vietnam, but also it's related to the Taliban, because also the Bolsheviks were a very insignificant force, particularly when this thing starts. So listen what Ayn Rand says. So she says that she experienced a situation where there would be a city which would be one day occupied by the Reds, the other day occupied by the Whites. And she says, the Red Army stood for totalitarian dictatorship and rule by terror. The White Army stood for nothing. Repeat, nothing. And then she says in the next page, again, this is the lessons of Vietnam. The Reds had an incentive, the promise of nationwide looting. They had the leadership and the semi-discipline of a criminal gang. They had an allegedly intellectual program and an allegedly moral justification. The Whites had icons. She means like the things that you carry on church. The Reds won. Now, let's move this to the case of Vietnam. The Viet Congs had the aura of national liberation, that we are the one who kicked out the French. Now we're also going to kick out the Americans. This is very, very powerful. And people don't understand the strong appeal of communism when it took the form of national liberation. The Greek Communist Party before the Second World War was a power of something like 3%. After the resistance, it had like half the country with it. So also in Vietnam, it was, oh, are you a collaborator and are you in favor of this corrupt regime of the South, or are you for the national liberation? Now take this to Afghanistan. We are the ones that liberated the country from the Soviets, who fought the Soviets. we were the one that brought some order, because between the victory against the Soviets and the victory of the Taliban in 96, there was a period of anarchy. So the Taliban has the quote moral, let's say the quote moral high ground of we stand for something. We are the students of God. Taliban literally mean students. And again, what did we offer in advance? Oh, you'll be able to vote. And Rand mentions exactly this when it comes to the Vietnam case, that how ridiculous it is to go and die in another country so that the South Vietnamese can vote. It's so, again, you have this idea that between those who fight for something and those who have no idea, why they fight and what would victory look like, the first side will usually win. But that's not even the worst part. What happened after Vietnam? So what happened after the humiliation in Vietnam? Very quickly, we saw Cambodia rising up and Cambodia becoming communist. And actually, Cambodia provoking the United States with that incident with the ship, which I don't remember the exact name now. What happens then? 1979, Khomeini takes over Iran and Khomeini takes the hostages. So we see that it's not only that you are defeated, we also see that this could have a domino effect of other people saying, well, turns out you're actually a paper tiger and there's nothing to be afraid of you. And again, today, this is the case. Yesterday, before we began the episode with Elan Zurno, I asked him behind the scenes, do you think the Taliban now are going to play this PR game towards the West? Look, we are not going to stone women. We're not going to put them on full burqas. So leave us alone. And he said, yeah, maybe, but even if they do the things that they did in following 96, what's going to happen to them? Are we going to go back there and say, oh, now we're back to fight? So basically they know that they might want to play it, a bit, oh, we're now part of the international community or whatever, but they know that whatever they do, anything goes. As the Cambodians knew that anything they do, anything goes. And remember, the Cambodian regime was not defeated by any Western intervention. They were defeated by the intervention of the Vietnamese, because they were like, okay, even for a communist country, like killing 20% of your population is a bit too much. But what I mean is that following Vietnam, there were other places elsewhere in the world that says, yeah, these people are a joke. We can take advantage of this.
Yeah. And, people like the Islamists of the Taliban, they're not, they don't think long range, so it's not like they're rational people who just want to have Islamic law. I mean, part of being a religious fundamentalist is that you reject reality. You don't think about the long range. You're a step closer to being an animal in that respect. And so even if they did, expect America to return and punish them, they would still probably do exactly what they're doing, because they're just not thinking that far ahead. But also, yes, their experience has shown them that America went over there basically to congratulate them on how wonderful their religion is and how superior their way of life is to our materialistic, hedonistic way of life. They basically, they got nothing but moral validation from the West, as have most. And I mean, this has been going on for many, many, many decades. Uncivilized people around the world have been sent gifts, money, and moral empowerment and told your way of life is more pure and beautiful than ours. And you can see that in American universities, going back even to before the Industrial Revolution. Probably Rousseau would be a big name that comes to mind, that here in the West, we are suspicious of our own civility. Our own civilization. We're suspicious of our own civilized way of life, and we see the noble savage as superior. With regards to the White Army versus the Red Army in Russia, I remember reading Rand talking about how she was during the revolution and after, she was looking for the philosophy that the whites would be fighting for, because obviously the Reds were fighting for communism, Marxism. The White Army, like, what were they actually fighting for other than resisting the left, quote unquote? I don't know if they were called that, but resisting communism. What were they for? And I think Rand, I'm paraphrasing here from memory, she said, like, I realized somewhat to my own horror that I would need to come up with that philosophy. Like, there is no fundamental philosophy that fundamentally, answers the communists. Here we are, multiple decades after Ayn Rand's death. I'm very sad that so few thinkers have taken Ayn Rand's philosophy seriously. So of all the many, 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 many influential people that have read Ayn Rand, so few of them evidently had it in them to really give her philosophy a fair shake. And you see the absolute ridiculousness that the world has sunk into, and still nobody will just give egoism a chance, give capitalism a chance, a fair shake, I should say. Take it seriously. Nope, still nothing. So we are seeing pragmatism and altruism bringing devastation both domestically and abroad to people. Still, we can't get Ayn Rand's philosophy to be taken seriously by influential people, and you can see the results. Let's grab a couple super chats, shall we? Phil with £5 says, another violent enemy of freedom survives due to incorrect premises. But would any European allies have been less pragmatic? I don't think so. I don't think so either. I've heard it said that the French lately are more tough, like specifically after some of the terrorism they've endured. They went over to some ISIS targets and really unleashed hell on them. But after that, after dropping bombs, what would any European countries do? They're obviously not pro-capitalism. They're not pro-individualism. They have America's basic same philosophical influences. They're not. They don't have moral confidence to go expect those countries to emulate the Western way of life. So yeah, I expect it would end up basically looking the same. Marilyn with $5 says, where are the feminists, Kamala? Girls in Afghanistan can no longer go to school and are being forced into marriage at 15. Yeah, it is very sad. I'll say somewhat tongue-in-cheek. I don't expect that the Taliban will respect the pronouns of people that they are governing over. But I mean,
by the way, I have a suspicion with this. I hear this quite often. Where are the feminists on this? Do you really think that the average university student really knows even the concept of there's such a thing as history? It's guided by something like principles. So it's everything so perceptual based. It's everything so, what is the trend of the day? What am I being taught? I think it would be an interesting social experiment. Like, that's why quite often I say the ideology we're facing, it's nothing which is very strong. And I think that if you go to a university for 3 years and you persuade them that the intellectual tendency of the day is Hans Hermann Hoppe, in 3 years, they're going to quote you that Democrats and communists must be physically removed. So it's not that they don't care, or it's not that they can't, how is it called? They can't connect the dots. They can't connect the dots that, okay, that there is such a thing as individual rights, and it's not that the West is patriarchy, but patriarchy is something that has to do with all this thing is way too abstract. It's way too conceptual. Give them specifics. Tell them how there's the gender pay gap. Tell them there's such a thing as patriarchy. That's as far as it goes. And again, if to the same people with the same training, which is basically not to think, you give them something completely different, in 3 years they're gonna believe something else. So I understand the sentiment that says, why is there no consistency? But consistency requires that you know how to think. You can think in principles, and you can say, well, this principle that I apply here, how does it apply there? And I think you're asking way too much from the average person, which is the product of the Western education system.
Yeah, the average person is not going to answer the deepest problems of existence from scratch. I mean, and you and I didn't connect the dots before reading Ayn Rand and mulling over it and exploring it with earnestness. So the average person, is just not going to, the average person just kind of looks at what are the various cultural, what are the various opinions in the culture, and they're either going to consciously select one of them, but more typically they just kind of follow their values. They, a certain art inspires them to see the world a certain way, or the people around them voice certain opinion, they end up, they kind of follow. It would make me very happy if, the Malala Yousafzais of the world, women or just people in general who have stood up against tyranny. Malala Yousafzai is the Afghani girl who got, I think, persecuted for wanting to study, and she became kind of an icon for women's education. Yeonmi, the North Korean girl, she's making rounds lately. I think she's read Ayn Rand. Someone said she mentioned Atlas Shrugged in an interview, but it would there's a young lady who joins us on Clubhouse sometimes. She's currently in Iran. These people have enormous capital. They have social capital as people who are in a dictatorship or coming from one, leaving one. They have a lot of power. If they were to, the list goes on. All these apostates. What's her name? Ayaan Hirsi Ali. If she took Ayn Rand's philosophy very seriously and came to see how, like, this is the philosophy that's going to permanently with longevity save us from dictatorship and theocracy. If these people were to really understand Ayn Rand's philosophy and advocate for it, this would have enormous effects on people, because these people, they've walked the walk. They walked out of a dictatorship with great courage. So that's something I would really like to see. Sadly, like I said, very few influential people have taken Ayn Rand seriously thus far. So the average person, what do they see? They see leftists who basically agree with the communists, or they basically, they agree with having a state run your life. And on the flip side, they see Republicans basically who in a lot of ways basically are anti-liberty. They're anti-capitalist. They're you even see some of them kind of saying, like, with cynicism, like I'm looking at my social media and people are like, oh, those young ladies in Afghanistan, they were going to have an OnlyFans account. And
I've seen this. It's everywhere. You cannot tell where the joke starts and where it's serious, but I've seen it a lot. Or people saying, well, the Taliban at least stand for order, but not in terms of explaining what happened. In terms of almost sanctioning. Someone needs to, if you compare the debauchery of the West, someone has to put order.
Yeah, the right, and certainly what the right has become in recent years, is socially conservative and sees the pursuit of happiness as a failure. So women, certainly, they think, have been let down by the pursuit of happiness.
As if
liberty.
The pursuit of happiness means OnlyFans or
right. That's all it could mean. If you see some women doing it and dropping the context also of the way they were educated and the prevalent philosophies that are influencing the culture, but if they see women behaving a certain way, that means liberty as a whole has failed. That I say, I as an individual happen to be a man, but my contemporary women, they as individuals, if they want to make their own decisions, and they very well may make the right decisions, if we want to live the moral life, if we want to live the rational life, the political system should be hospitable to that. In other words, the government should stay out of the way. So I don't care if 1 billion people make the wrong decision with their lives. If I want to make the right decision, politics should be hospitable to that. Politics should not get in the way of that. So,
sorry, notice also something else, right? Everyone is focusing on, well, the Taliban, it's bad, and what's going to happen with women. Now, it's obvious that women are going to be one of the biggest victims, but the Taliban are horrendous beyond that. And again, it's not the fashionable thing to do. But for example, if you see what happened to the secular communist leader of Afghanistan and how he died when the Taliban entered Kabul in 96, it's like stuff that can haunt you for nightmares, or they mutilate. So it's the whole package. It's not that, they're a bit social conservative within, but no, they are, I would say, perhaps one of the worst regimes that you could have, because they combine that we take ideas seriously and our ideas are bad. For example, in Soviet Union, particularly after Stalin, you have people with bad ideas, but no one was really taking them seriously. So even the Stasi officer was kind of this bureaucrat who wasn't really into it. The Taliban are really into it. And you can see this because this is how they grew up. As someone said, many of these people who are now the Taliban, have never lived a single day of their life which is not under a situation of war or occupation. The previous generation of Taliban are the generation who were in exile in Pakistan, and they grew up in madrasas, and they grew up with the idea that you have to fight the West. So these are people that these ideas are, it's not that I went to university for 3 years and there's this culture around me. No. This is your life. So they take these things seriously. So you have this almost rare combination of, I would say, true quote ideologues who takes these ideas seriously, which, as I say, is not what happens quite often with the left. That's why I'm a bit triggered when people say, oh, these SJWs are communists. No, but these Taliban, these are the real thing. They take their bad ideas seriously, which is perhaps the worst possible combination.
Yes, Phil with £5 says, don't ultimately all collectivists get the governments they deserve? Well, if their ideas prevail in that place, then yes. Okay, Marilyn with $2 says, I know women are not the only issue by far.
Oh yeah, but Marilyn, I wasn't replying to you, but I see a lot in social media that this is the issue that gains prevalence, and again, it should. But let's not miss that even if there wasn't a single woman in Afghanistan, they would still be a murderous. I don't want to say death cult, because this was used for ISIS and it was way more relevant for them. But for example, if you read stories about the Mujahideen and their war against the Soviets and atrocities that happened there, of course, they were on the defending side. But yeah, this is stuff which is beyond the imagination.
Yeah, and of course they frame it in terms of groups, like, okay, women's rights, minorities in Afghanistan are going to be hurt by this. If an individual person is being oppressed, that's all you need to know. Of course, it's extra ugly if a woman, because she's a woman, is being oppressed. But what if it's not a woman? The point is, liberty is an all or nothing package. Either every individual is able to follow their own judgment in the pursuit of happiness, or else liberty is an illusion in that region. We need.
Let me give one more clarification, because I don't want to be misunderstood with this. The main reason I'm bringing this up is, have you seen all these tweets and comments that say, notice that in the airplanes, it's mostly men. So why do they leave? You would expect that it would be women who are flying away. So this kind of makes it sound as if, well, if you're a woman, Taliban suck, but otherwise, why do you leave? No, it sucks. If you're not with the Taliban, it sucks. So that's why I made the comment. It wasn't a reply to Marilyn.
The world is a very strange place sometimes, and it becomes easier to understand when you study the history of philosophy, or you learn to look at things from that perspective. You can see how we've ended up in a place where the most technologically advanced, politically free elements of the world are clashing with some of the most barbaric, and nobody can communicate. Nobody could figure out how to solve problems. All these problems would be very quickly solved, whether it's the logistics of war, or just how these countries that oppress women and oppress many could emerge into something much more rational. Brandon with $4.99 says, thanks for an excellent conversation. Keep up the great work. And you keep up with the great feedback. And thank you for the super chat. All right, should we jump over to Clubhouse, or what? What do you think?
We can jump in Clubhouse. I can't, because I have to set up I'm very glad our friend enjoyed our discussion. I have to say my mind is a bit all over the place, because I was anyway, I prepared a lot for today, but I kind of lost my notes. I kind of lost my train of thought, but I'm glad the people got value out of it. So what I was trying to say is that whether you see the Russian Civil War, or the Vietnam War, or the Kabul War, if you see them in principle, you're going to see a lot of things that are in common. And again, maybe I threw too much on the table, but I hope it kind of made sense in terms of how there's a consistency, whether you are in 1917 or in 75 or 2021. And again, you mentioned read and rant. Why should you do it? because the things he mentions about the Vietnam War apply to almost everything. At some point, he said, we sent loads of ammunition and technology. We didn't send any moral support. And you could say the same happened with Kabul. We sent trillion. What was the final amount of stuff that we sent? And all that was worth at the end, nothing. People with flip-flops and AK-47 overcame all this great technology and ammunition because they had the one thing that we didn't have, which was conviction. Bad convictions, bad convictions.
Yes, and remember, I can't say this enough. All of this boils down to your own personal values. The only way any of this matters is if you, the viewer, and me, the speaker, are looking at the world first-handedly and asking a simple question: what do I want? Once you've answered, what do I want? And I think the answer should be a good life. A lot of things start to fall into place. A lot of problems become much simpler to address. A lot of philosophies are ruled out, and at least one particular philosophy becomes very relevant. So I think you can guess which philosophy I'm hinting at. I know I'm like mansplaining. I think
okay.
That's not even mansplaining. That's just being bitchy. All right, thank you all. Ransplaining. There it is. All right. Thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to be on Clubhouse. We'd love to hear what you think. I know that's maybe it sounded sarcastic, but we'd love to hear what you think. Nikos, important. I told you guys, he's got these time constraints that he needs to do to make himself seem valuable. He's going to go get ready for the debate between Yaron Brook and who is it today?
A free market environmentalist. That's going to be interesting.
This is going to be interesting. A free market environmentalist. What do you think? We want to know. See you there back here on this channel coming up in 22 minutes on this very channel. So don't go anywhere vis-a-vis YouTube. However, we'll also be killing the time in the meantime, pre-gaming it and post-gaming it on Clubhouse. I'll see you there. And thank you, Nikos, and goodbye. All right.